So seeing as how I'm building a precision rifle, or at least trying to build the most precise AR-10 variant that I can, I've decided to lap my upper receiver. Now, some people don't think lapping is needed with today's technology and CNC machining, but sometimes it is. And this lapping that I'm going to do is more of a just in case, just to make sure that it is perpendicular to the bore. Now, lapping is a process in which you remove material to produce a desired dimension, surface finish, or a shape. And the point of lapping an upper receiver is to make sure the face of the receiver that mates up with the barrel is completely perpendicular to the bore of the barrel and the bore of the upper receiver. Now, when I talk about the front surface of the upper receiver being perpendicular to the bore of the upper receiver and barrel, what I'm talking about is this part right here. And what the bore is, that's the opening that your barrel slides into, and that same bore is what your bolt carrier slides through. And you want to make sure that is in line with your barrel bore. Now, seeing as how I'm building an AR-10 variant chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor, I looked online to find a AR-10 lapping tool. And you can find lapping tools for AR-15s. In fact, Brownells has a whole video on it. But for an AR-10, I couldn't find one. So, with me being a machinist, I just went to the shop and a buddy of mine helped me machine one. When I got to the machine shop, first thing that we did is we measured the inside diameter of the upper receiver using telescopic gauges. Once the gauges popped out, you lock it down, bring it out, and then you take a micrometer and you measure. You do that about 3 or 4 times, and that'll give you a good estimate on what the inner diameter of that upper receiver is. Then we got some 2-inch round stock, put it in the Haas CNC tool room lathe, and began machining. The first cutting process on the lathe is we got the length that's going to be inserted into the upper receiver down to where it's just a little bit too thick to fit in the receiver. Then we took it and we flipped it around in the lathe to machine the other end. Then that can be chucked up to a drill. We take more and more material off, obviously. And this last pass, when we get to the diameter we want, the CNC lathe is going to face that lapping tool we just made. Then we flip it around in the chuck again, drill a little hole in the end so we can hold it between centers so it doesn't wobble, and we cut it to the final diameter so it'll fit into the upper receiver. And here's the final product. Now, there's a couple videos on YouTube, and actually Brownell shows a video of how to lap your upper receiver, and they have it in the vise horizontally. They put an abrasive compound on a lapping tool, and then they insert that into the upper receiver. They chuck it up to a drill, and they push while the drill is spinning. And that abrasive compound is going to act like a sandpaper, taking away a little bit at a time. Now, with the lapping tools and with upper receivers are going to vary in dimensions. Not too much, but they will vary. And with that, every lapping tool might not fit exactly perfectly. Even this custom lapping tool that I made has a little bit of wiggle room when you insert it into the upper receiver. And when you have the upper receiver in a vise horizontally like this, gravity is going to put more pressure on the bottom of that lapping tool. And when you chuck it up to a drill, you're going to want to keep that drill perfectly straight so that you're not putting any pressure on one area and not the other. And with that, I got to thinking, why do it horizontally when we can do it vertically and have gravity help us? So what I did is I took the receiver, I flipped it up vertically into the vise, and with that, I'm not even going to chuck it up to a drill. I'm just going to do it by hand, because it really shouldn't be all that much that you need to lap. So with it vertically in the vise, I take a level and I make sure that that thing is perfectly level so that when the lapping tool is inserted and gravity is assisting me, that it's not pushing on one side more than it is the other. Everything's equal. Then I put the abrasive compound on the lapping tool right there and I insert it. After about a minute of turning it, I took it out and I cleaned off that lapping compound off the surface of the upper receiver so I could see how much it had taken off. And just to the right of the barrel index slot, you'll see that the surface is still black. And that tells you that this surface wasn't completely perpendicular to the bore. So it's a good thing that I did decide to lap this upper receiver. I do it a few more times, and after a minute or two, I take the lapping tool out and I clean the surface to see the progress I've made. Now, some of that lapping compound might get inside of the upper receiver, and you're going to want to clean that out because you don't want to lap the inside where the barrel extension is going to slide into. So every time I check to see how much further I have to go, I'll make sure that the inside sleeve of the upper receiver where the barrel extension goes, I'll make sure that that is free of any of that abrasive compound. This whole process only took me a couple minutes doing it by hand, so I would highly suggest you do it by hand and not chuck it up to a drill, because you might take a little bit too much off. Now, another thing that lapping is good for, other than making sure that that surface is perpendicular to the bore, is to line up your barrel nut if you have a barrel nut that has to be indexed to a certain point to allow the gas tube to go through. So if your barrel nut doesn't index or line up, no matter how little or how much you torque it down, there are two ways to get your barrel nut to index right. The easiest way is to use barrel shims, but a more precise way would be to lap the upper receiver like I'm doing here. Now, once all the anodizing has been ground off, you're done. Make sure you clean the upper receiver inside and out, and also make sure that you get all the abrasive compound out of those threads, because you definitely don't want that abrasive compound in the threads when you're putting your barrel nut on. After I've cleaned it pretty good, what I'll do is I'll take the barrel nut that I'm going to use and I'll run it down the threads and make sure that I don't hear any grinding. If you feel any grinding or grit and you hear it, take it off and clean those threads again. Make sure they're clean. And that's about it on lapping your upper receiver. Hope you liked this video. If you did, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Next.
That'll do, pig. That'll do.